What if I told you the exact same mechanism that stops your hairline from receding is literally the key to surviving a trip into a parallel universe?
I mean, it sounds like the setup to a really strange sci-fi joke, honestly.
Right.
But we are actually looking at a framework today that argues those two things are governed by the exact same mathematical laws.
Exactly. And, welcome to this deep dive, by the way. Today we're exploring the Structured Multiversal Interactions Framework, or SMI,
By Dr. Melvin Sewell.
right, Dr. Sewell. And I need to warn you right up front, the scope of this deep dive is going to sound, well, impossible.
It really is.
Because we were starting with the highly tangible, literal biochemistry of cosmetic hair loss treatments.
Yeah.
And from there, we're scaling all the way up to high-concept theoretical physics, multiversal navigation, and, eventually systemic corporate decay in our modern institutions.
Which I know sounds like a completely random assortment of wildly disparate subjects,
That sounds crazy.
but they are all connected by one single critical thematic tissue. And Dr. Sewell calls it sovereign diagnostics.
Sovereign diagnostic.
Yeah, whether you're looking at cellular biology or quantum cosmology or like a legal battle with your insurance company,
Right.
this work is ultimately about one thing: how a system, or how you as an individual, maintains its core identity against external forces that basically want to dilute or erase it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mm.
Because to understand Sewell's multiverse, we actually have to start grounded in sheer physical reality.
You do.
Specifically, we have to start by looking at a human hair follicle.
Yeah, it's wild. Dr. Sewell's early biomedical research introduces us to a highly grounded cosmetic molecule called SH1.
Which was designed to treat androgenetic alopecia, or AGA.
Right, which is a really common form of hair loss. But to understand why Sewell became obsessed with it, we have to look at the mechanisms of how hair loss is usually treated versus how SH1 does it.
Make it make sense for us.
So traditionally, you treat this with systemic 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. Now, these systemic drugs work by floating through your entire bloodstream, lowering levels of the hormone DHT everywhere in your body.
And that's a massive problem, right? Because
Yeah.
DHT doesn't just affect your scalp.
Exactly.
You are altering your body's entire systemic hormone profile just to fix a local problem on top of your head. It's like turning off the electricity to your entire neighborhood just to fix a sparking outlet in your kitchen.
That is exactly it. You get massive side effects because the drug just doesn't respect localized boundaries. It disrupts the endocrine homeostasis of the entire organism.
But SH1 is fundamentally different.
It is. It's a proprietary, high-affinity, non-steroidal androgen receptor antagonist.
Which means?
In plain terms, it binds to the exact receptors in the scalp that cause hair follicles to shrink, effectively blocking them.
Right.
But the crucial revolutionary detail is that it acts strictly locally.
Yeah, if you look at the charts Sewell put together in his biomedical infographics, the contrast is crazy.
Yeah.
On one side, he maps out an investigational drug candidate called PP405.
The rival drug.
Yeah. And when you administer PP405, it has this dose-dependent systemic uptake.
Yeah.
It breaches critical safety thresholds, infiltrating the dermis, getting into the bloodstream, and basically bleeding all over the place.
That's messy.
But SH1, it has literally zero systemic absorption across all dose levels. The epidermal barrier remains completely intact.
The perfect boundary.
Exactly. So it's like having a highly disciplined elite security guard at a building. Think of SH1 as that security guard.
Okay, I like this.
They stay exactly at the front door of the building, which is the hair follicle. They do their job, they check IDs, they stop the bad guys from getting in, but they never, ever leave their post.
Right.
PP405, on the other hand, is like a rogue agent that comes through the front door, but then just starts wandering into the building's central control room, messing with the systemic alarms, flipping switches it definitely shouldn't be touching.
That is a perfect analogy for you listening to picture this. Because the rogue agent, PP405, represents a complete failure of boundaries. It bleeds into the surrounding environment.
Yeah.
And that concept, not bleeding into the environment, is the exact philosophical launch pad Sewell uses for his theoretical physics.
Which is still such a leap to me.
Well, SH1 represents perfect localized stability. It maintains its structural integrity without compromising the larger macro system. And Sewell, looking at this perfect chemical boundary, asked a massive question.
Which was?
If you can achieve that mathematical perfection at a molecular level, can you scale that exact geometry up to a multiversal level?
Wait, hold on, you're losing me. You're saying a biochemist looking at baldness cures suddenly starts writing equations for parallel dimensions?
Pretty much, yeah.
What is the bridge there? How does a cosmetic molecule logically evolve into a multiverse theory?
It's about the mathematics of boundary conditions. Sewell realized that the equations keeping SH1 localized could actually be applied to theoretical physics. He took the biochemical boundary integrity of the SH1 molecule and scaled it into a purely mathematical cosmological concept he calls SH1 resonance.
Okay, so he abstracts the behavior of the molecule into a law of physics.
Exactly. He asks, how do you keep your identity intact when the environment around you isn't just a human body, but an infinitely expanding multiverse?
Wow.
Because when you introduce the concept of parallel realities, you introduce infinite, crushing environmental pressure. Sewell outlined something called the deformability spectrum.
The deformability spectrum.
Okay, yeah. In the SMI framework, when a traveler or an entity traverses between parallel realities, the literal physical geometry of their existence begins to morph under the pressure.
So they lose their shape.
Entirely. First, their physical form breaks down into mathematical ratios, and then eventually into what he calls sovereign frequency states.
That is insane. So the philosophical concept of a hair loss drug is going to save my soul in a parallel dimension.
I mean, essentially, yes.
Yeah, that sounds like something out of a comic book. But I'm understanding the mechanism. It's basically like a deep-sea diver's tether, right?
Go on. How so?
Well, as you dive deeper into the ocean, the pressure completely changes the physics around you.
Right.
Your biology wants to compress, your lungs want to collapse. The ocean essentially wants to crush you until you are indistinguishable from the water.
Yes.
But if you have a structural tether, in this case, the SH1 resonance acting as a metaphysical invariant, it remembers who you are. It's the anchor that stops you from being diluted into the ocean.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, because without that anchor, Sewell notes that multiversal travelers face identity dilution and structural collapse.
Identity dilution, that sounds terrifying.
You quite literally bleed out into the multiverse, just like the systemic PP405 drug bleeding into the bloodstream. You cease to be you.
God.
So to navigate this deformability safely without losing your shape, Sewell maps out a mechanism called the dual telemetry protocol.
Walk me through that. How do you actually navigate if your body has been reduced to a frequency state?
Well, the dual telemetry protocol requires you to balance two massive extremes. Externally, you calibrate against the most extreme, undeniable physical boundaries we know of.
Which are?
Black hole signatures.
Yeah.
That gives you an external map.
Yep.
Internally, you calibrate against speculative cognitive thresholds, basically the limits of your own consciousness.
So external black holes and internal mind limits.
Right. By balancing the macrogravity of a black hole with the micro limits of your own mind, you define a safe operational threshold known as the cancellation zone.
Meaning, as long as you stay in that zone, the multiverse cancels out its crushing pressure on you.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But if your internal focus slips or, you miscalculate the external gravity, you push past that boundary and enter the highly dangerous excess zone.
And that's where identity dilution begins.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this fundamentally changes how we view the multiverse. It's not just a domain of random, chaotic, parallel dimensions where anything goes.
Right.
It is a highly structured ecosystem, and it is governed by one sovereign truth. If your foundational philosophy, your SH1 resonance, remains intact, you remain anchored, no matter how aggressively the reality around you deforms.
I love that. The multiverse is basically just trying to dissolve you, and your job is to stay solid.
Exactly.
But so, okay, now that we know how to navigate safely using this tether, the obvious question for you listening is, where exactly are we navigating?
Right. What's the map?
Yeah, what does this multiverse actually look like if we had a map?
That brings us to Sewell's Echo-Rift reality diagnostics. This is his category-theoretic model that actually classifies different universes.
Because he doesn't just say universe A and universe B.
No. He categorizes them based on informational density, essentially the amount of entropy, complexity, or sheer data per unit of volume.
Okay.
He measures this using a metric called the reality level scalar, or RLS.
And he breaks this down into 4 hierarchical levels, right?
Yeah.
So we start at alpha, which is diffuse, then beta, which is structured, gamma is entangled, and finally omega, which is ultra-dense.
Correct. And the omega level completely upends traditional cosmology. This is what Sewell calls the omega gateway architecture.
Omega gateway, okay.
In his model, black holes are level omega entities. Now, traditionally in physics, we tend to think of black holes as massive trash compactors, right?
That's areas of information.
Nothing escapes. Exactly. But Sewell posits that they are actually transcendent nodes. They are amplifiers of informational density that serve as bridges, connecting lower reality states to higher ones.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we think about informational density in terms of something you and I use every day, like computer files,
Okay, I see where you're going.
you can look at a diffuse universe, an alpha-level universe,
Yeah.
like an uncompressed basic text file.
Right.
It takes up a lot of visual space, but there's really not a lot of complex data in it. It's just simple text. But these level omega black holes, are they basically like impossibly dense zip files?
Exactly. But imagine clicking to open that zip file, and instead of just finding a compressed folder of documents, the very act of unzipping it dynamically builds a staircase to a completely new, upgraded computer system.
Whoa.
From the outside, the black hole just looks like a single crushing point of data. But inside, it contains an entire hyper-compressed operating system of a higher reality. That's the gateway.
That is mind-bending. And Sewell didn't just hypothesize this, right? He actually ran simulations to test how these different files or universes interact when they bump into each other.
He did. If you look at his Epoch 5 simulation data, he models 3 interacting universes under the SMI framework.
Right.
Yes. In Epoch 5, Universe U1 emerges as dominant. It has a dimensional scaling factor of 1.41 and a sovereignty index quotient of 2.0.
Meaning its external boundaries are incredibly robust.
Exactly. It knows exactly where its borders are. Then Universe U2 remains neutral, but Universe U3, it completely collapses.
Wait, what do you mean it collapses? Like an ant getting stepped on by U1?
More like a drop of ink hitting a swimming pool. It loses its boundary and ceases to be a distinct drop.
Oh, wow.
The mechanism for its collapse is listed as porous boundary conditions. Because U3 couldn't maintain its sovereign borders, the higher informational density of U1 just bled into it and absorbed it completely.
And Sewell backs this up with actual theoretical physics, which is where things get really dense.
There he does.
In his simulation of U1 absorbing U3, he tracks a parameter called the EEMIJ, and he gets a live reading of 0.2412.
Correct.
He then states this happens through Kaluza-Klein graviton exchange with a warp factor of L equals 30.
Which shows how...
Hold on, stop. You just casually threw Kaluza-Klein graviton exchange and EEMIJ 0.2412 at me. Break that down for me like I'm 5. What is actually exchanging with what here?
Fair enough. Let's simplify. Kaluza-Klein theory is a real classic physics concept that tries to unify gravity and electromagnetism by suggesting there are hidden extra dimensions rolled up microscopically in our universe.
Okay, I'm with you.
Sewell uses this to explain multiversal gravity. Graviton exchange simply means that these parallel universes are physically pressing against each other across those hidden dimensions, exchanging gravitational force.
Okay, so the universes are rubbing against each other. What is the 0.2412 reading?
The EEMIJ reading of 0.2412 is essentially the friction coefficient of that multidimensional pressure. It's the exact mathematical point where Universe U1's gravity overwhelmed Universe U3's boundary, causing U3 to structurally fail. The mathematics literally dictate how a massive external force exerts influence to crush a localized field.
Wow. Okay, that actually makes perfect sense. But this is exactly where Dr. Sewell's framework takes its most jarring yet profound pivot.
Yes, it is.
Because multiversal structural collapse isn't just a sci-fi problem for parallel dimensions.
Not at all.
We're pulling this all the way back to the real world. You, listening right now, might not be too worried about falling into a level omega black hole today.
Probably not.
But the exact same mechanism of porous boundaries and identity dilution that destroyed Universe U3 is happening to you right now in our own societal institutions.
Yeah.
Sewell takes this cosmic math and applies it directly to the erosion of your individual sovereignty and everyday life.
He formalizes this through what he calls the Sovereignty Decay Index.
Right.
It's a diagnostic framework for scoring this systemic erosion of individual rights when they bump up against massive macro systems like corporations or legal bureaucracies.
And just as a quick caveat for you listening, Sewell points fingers at some major real-world corporations here, like 23andM and State Farm.
He does.
And we're obviously just following his data trail today to understand the theory. We're absolutely neutrally reporting this, not taking any legal or political stances on these companies.
Of course.
But his findings on these specific cases are wild when you look at them through the lens of boundary collapse.
They absolutely are. Sewell maps out 3 very specific waypoints of real-world decay.
Let's go through them.
The first is sabotage representation. He cites a case involving a law firm, Turban Chu Height, where legal counsel actively undermined a client's case.
Now, why does Sewell care about a bad lawyer?
Because legal representation is supposed to be your protective boundary in a courtroom.
Right.
When your own lawyer sabotages you, your boundary is fundamentally porous. You're completely defenseless against the legal macro system.
The second waypoint he brings up is insurance silence. He cites State Farm, noting an instance where a promised settlement response on May 30, 2026 simply vanished into thin air.
Yeah. He points to this as institutional latency.
Right.
By infinitely delaying a response, the massive corporation forces the individual into an indefinite holding pattern, effectively neutralizing their power.
It's like gravity just holding you in place.
Exactly. But the third waypoint is perhaps the most striking example of systemic absorption. He calls it bankruptcy erasure.
Okay, this one is crazy.
He cites a specific claim, claim number 5430, under docket number 1875 in the 23andM bankruptcy proceedings. This was a $10,000 claim filed by an individual regarding stolen personal DNA information.
Which is the ultimate violation of your biological boundary, by the way.
Yeah.
Your literal genetic code was breached.
Exactly. But through the corporate restructuring process, that $10,000 claim was legally reduced to $0.
Zero.
It's a literal financial nullification. A judge hits a gavel, and the harm done to you is erased from the record to protect the macro system.
That's insane.
When Sewell runs these three waypoints through his sovereignty decay index, he looks at severity, frequency, and institutional reach.
And what's the score?
The score is incredibly alarming. A composite score of 23 out of 30, which the index classifies as high sovereignty decay.
It's terrifying because you realize how fragile your personal borders really are.
Yeah.
But that decay isn't just happening in courtrooms or insurance offices. It is happening in the very digital feeds we're all consuming on our phones every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Sewell introduces a concept called the algorithmic snare. He provides an exploit analysis of hostile feed injection.
Let's look at the mechanism there. In black box cascade environments, meaning the secret algorithms running social media,
Right.
swarms actively weaponize metadata to accelerate feed velocity. The speed completely overwhelms human moderation systems, essentially forcing users to consume corrupted, manipulative content against their will.
Right. And in the TrueFlow multiverse, which is like a mythic narrative translation of these physics that Sewell built, he calls this exact digital manipulation toxic reality packets forced into experiential fields.
Toxic reality packets.
Yeah, and when you read that, it suddenly clicks.
Yeah.
It's the exact same mechanism as the rogue PP405 hair loss molecule breaching your dermal barrier.
Yes.
It's the exact same mechanism as universe U3 collapsing because it couldn't repel the gravity of U1. Whether it's a molecule, a universe, or a Twitter bot, it is a hostile environment forcibly penetrating your localized borders.
What's fascinating here is how Sewell used the physics we discussed earlier, that Kaluza-Klein graviton exchange, as a literal metaphor for modern society.
How so?
He calls this societal pressure ritualized containment. Just as massive gravity waves mathematically suppress localized quantum fields, massive macro systems like corporations, algorithms, compromise legal institutions trap and suppress individual actors.
Wow.
They create a reality where the individual feels entirely powerless against the sheer density of the system. Your structural tether starts to snap.
So what does this all mean? Are we just destined to have our personal boundaries dissolved by these massive societal and multiversal forces? Is the end point just becoming a $0 claim in a cosmic bankruptcy court?
Not according to Sewell. Remember, this entire framework, the sovereign diagnostics, is designed to help you find an anchor.
Right.
And to combat the systemic erosion, he introduces a new sovereign variable. He calls it Saikou Venga.
Saikou Venga, what does that actually mean in practice?
It is a symbol, an emergent state of being. It represents resonance-driven autonomy. It is the ultimate localized pushback against sovereignty decay. To achieve Saikou Venga means you have perfectly calibrated your internal and external boundaries. You are acting like the SH1 molecule.
I see.
You refuse to bleed into the environment, and you refuse to let the toxic reality packets of the macro system bleed into you. You remain sovereign.
That is just a phenomenal concept. And it brings us full circle on the brilliant thematic line Dr. Sewell has drawn for you listening today.
It really does.
Think about the journey we just took. We started at the microscopic level, the protective, highly localized boundary of the SH1 molecule, keeping a tiny hair follicle safe from systemic chaos.
Yeah.
Then we scaled up to the cosmic anchor, the SH1 resonance you would need to survive the infinitely expanding, crushing pressures of a structured multiverse without losing your geometry.
Exactly.
And finally, we brought it right to your front door. the legal, financial, and algorithmic anchors you desperately need to protect your identity from modern institutional decay.
It is an incredibly cohesive worldview. The core lesson here is the absolute non-negotiable necessity of maintaining sovereign diagnostics over your own life.
100%.
In a world that is becoming increasingly dense, chaotic, and porous, actively understanding exactly where your personal boundaries lie is the only way to prevent your own structural collapse.
I couldn't agree more. It makes you want to audit your entire life and figure out where you are letting the outside world seep in.
Definitely.
But before we wrap up, I know you found one final, almost hidden thread in Dr. Sewell's archives that we absolutely have to share with everyone, and it has to do with the ultimate boundary, the boundary of human lifespan.
I did, and it pushes this entire boundary concept into the realm of time itself. It's
Right.
from a late-stage diagram Sewell created called the Quantum Consciousness Roadmap.
Okay.
In it, Sewell projects a 35-year convergence timeline. He maps biological neuroscience breakthroughs against the exponential scaling of quantum computing.
And he's looking at digital immortality, right?
Mm.
Uploading the brain.
Correct. He estimates that achieving a full lossless digital transfer of human consciousness will require a hardware threshold of roughly 200,000 qubits.
200 million.
Yeah, which is about 35 years away.
Okay.
But here's the mechanism that will keep you awake at night. He introduces something called the subjective time paradox.
Oh, this is the one. Break this down for them.
The paradox notes that if biological consciousness can truly be bridged and uploaded to quantum qubits, the very act of that digital uploading fundamentally changes how consciousness perceives time.
Right.
Think about it. Once your mind is free from biological degradation, free from the ticking clock of human cells, time as a subjective experience radically shifts. You are no longer experiencing time linearly.
Which leaves us with a staggering realization about that 35-year wait.
Exactly.
If you successfully upload, does the wait even happen for you?
That's the paradox. Sewell asks, what if the subjective experience of immortality arrives for you the very second before the machine is even finished being built?
Oh my God.
Because the moment you become data, the chronological wait for the hardware to mature is instantly nullified by your new quantum state.
Wow. That completely shatters the timeline. You might already be in the machine, just waiting to realize it.
That's a lot to think about.
What an incredible note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this exploration of structured multiversal interactions has given you a totally new lens to view your own world and your own personal borders.
It's been fascinating.
So keep questioning your reality, keep building those anchors, and remember, whether it's the molecules in your scalp, the algorithms in your pocket, or the quantum fabric of the multiverse, make sure you know exactly where your walls are and who is trying to seep through them. Until next time.